and fiber arts. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping things. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat feature. So you're welcome to ask questions throughout or make any sort of comments. If you're on Facebook, you can also post a comment or a question and my colleague Devin will transfer it over. So, oh, we don't have Facebook working yet, so we're trying to get that going. It was problematic last time too, so. Okay, bear with us a little bit. We're gonna try to get it going. One sec. Sorry about that. Oh, technology.
Facebook is always a pain. Oh, there we go. Right as I say Facebook is a pain.
Recorded forever.
Okay, so hi Facebook. Hi people that are tuning in on Facebook. Yeah, again, you can post a comment on Facebook and Devin will kindly post it in our chat so we can answer whatever questions you might have. And that's it. So I'm really glad to be joined by Lauren Sinner, Amy Meissner, and Susie Brandt. All three artists are in the museum's upcoming exhibition Remnants, which will run at the museum next year from February 4th through April 25th, 2021. So as a prelude to that exhibition, these artists have graciously agreed to join us today. And so we're gonna talk to them a bit about their practices and their creative process. But I'll take the time to introduce them now. Susie Brandt is a Baltimore-based visual artist who works across textiles and other media to investigate time, utility, color, presence, absence, and the myths of landscape and identity. Her artwork recasts lost and found material culture into textile objects, performances, and installations. Susie is currently a professor in the fiber department at the Maryland Institute College of Art. And I know we have several, I believe we have several of her students in the audience today, so welcome. Anchorage, Alaska artist Amy Meissner combines traditional handwork, found objects, and abandoned textiles to reference the literal, physical, and emotional labor of women. Her background is in clothing design, illustration, and creative writing, all of which combine in craft and cloth-based work. Manipulating discarded household cloth to create two-dimensional quilt-like forms and three-dimensional objects serves as a cultural nod to the embroidery created by generations of Scandinavian women in her family and confronts societal disregard and erasure of women's handwork. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Emily.
Lauren Sinner is an artist, curator, teacher, writer, and performer based in Portland, Oregon, appropriating imagery from punk music, botanical illustrations, children's literature, and comedy shows. She creates pieces that balance between comfort, humor, and mental health issues. Using a variety of quilting and embroidery techniques, she creates works that appear to be simultaneously put together and falling apart. Lauren is currently the managing editor of Surface Design Journal, and I also want to welcome SDA members who are with us today. So, yay. So I sent these lovely artists about 5 questions, and we're gonna spend some time talking to them about those questions and seeing some of their works. So the first question I sent them was, what draws you to fiber?
Do you want to introduce Susie?
Oh, I did.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. My bad. Still waking up, I guess.
That's fine. Hi, Susie. Hi, everyone. So yeah, what draws you to fiber? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first since I was initially drawn to fiber. My mom is a quilter and embroiderer and like sewed a lot of my clothes when I was a kid. So I think like a lot of people who get into fiber, it came through kind of my family and home life. And so like I just remember always growing up watching my mom quilt and embroider, and even now in retirement, that's like her thing that she's doing. And so it was one of those things where she wanted me to get into it too, but as like a little kid and teenager, fibers was very not cool. I was like, no, I don't want to embroider. I don't want to quilt. That doesn't sound fun. And then in college, I had to take an art class, and I wasn't an art major at the time, but I like had to take one for general fulfillments. And I took a textiles class kind of on a whim. and ended up being like, oh, this is actually really fun and I really enjoy it. Now I have this kind of like connection to my mom because I'm now like have moved away from home. And so it was this way for me to kind of begin to feel connected after moving away as an adult, albeit like an 18-year-old adult, very young still. And it was, yeah, I love the processes of it. It's very, like, it reminds me of home and comfort. And I love like just the really rich and like loaded history that comes with like working within textiles.
And you grew up in the Midwest, right?
Yeah, I'm from Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I can go next. I'm going to share my screen here really quickly. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, so what draws me to fiber is really history and family, in particular, this family. So this is 4 generations of Swedish women. This is on my mother's side. My mother is the bombshell. In that photo, I'm the 2-year-old. And these are practices that were very important to the domestic role of these women in their homes, partly for survival, so the amount of mending that they did in particular, but also for beautification. So every evening after the rest of the chores were done on the farm, it was a self-sufficient farm, so there were an awful lot of chores and very physical labor. They would sit around the kitchen table and take care of the mending and take care of the embroidery and the crochet and all the things that they felt were important to beautify their home. So this is my response to that kind of work. I'm really inspired by abandoned cloth. This is a piece that was made from an abandoned quilt. But I also love the way that textiles reference the body. Quilts are the size of a body. If you stretch your hands and legs out, they cover your body. Objects like doilies and these smaller things fit in the hand, sometimes cover the face. So I think about that with regards to my work as well. I'm also really interested in how portable textiles are. When I became a mother, I was a painter and an illustrator, and that was something that I wasn't able to sustain anymore as part of my artistic practice. And so I turned back to the things that I was taught as a young girl. I learned how to embroider and crochet and sew at a really young age, and realized that there was a connection there between me and all of these women in my family who were doing these things in the home as part of their child rearing responsibilities, because they can be done when you are raising children. You can put these things down and you can take them back up again. Nobody has come and painted on your painting. Nobody's come and helped themselves to, something that needs to get FedExed the next day or dumped your watercolor water. These are things that are pretty sturdy and pretty hardy. And so that was definitely a shift for me, becoming a mother and constantly wanting to explore that narrative that's inherent in abandoned textiles in particular. So I'm going to stop sharing here.
Where do you source your textiles?
A lot of textiles end up just sort of coming to me. I have a large collection of things that arose from a project that I did called the Inheritance Project, which was a crowdsourcing project that lasted for 13 months. And then it ended in a body of work that became a solo exhibition that was at the Anchorage Museum, but then also at the State Museum in Juneau. And that was like 2017 through 2019 kind of time period. there was a lot of correspondence with people who were sending me things, and a lot of relationships that arose from that project, and really put me in touch with the underlying themes of women's labor in particular.
Thank you. Susie, do you want to go next?
Here's the question. What draws you to fiber? I was a sewing fool as a kid. My mother taught me to sew, and now I was thinking in retrospect, she had a whole bunch of kids at the same time. I was one of the older ones. But anyway, I loved it. I started when I was 7, making little dresses for myself. By this time, I'm like, I think like in 5th grade by the time I did this one. I'm really excited to show it at the Wisconsin Quilt Museum. And it was the 70s. This was a real look at that time. And I pieced it and then sewed it, and it was, you know, like hippie wear. So yeah, I came at it through sewing, and I loved showing off my outfits at school when I was a kid. So, you know, I had that show off thing going on too. And I ended up going to art school when I was sort of like 20-ish. I went to art school, and I ended up, it's a long story, it's too much to go into here, but I ended up going to Philadelphia College of Art, which is now the University of the Arts. And so I really think I came by it through mentors. So in Philadelphia, it was Warren Seelig and Sherry Gibson were my mentors. And this is my first solo exhibition in the window at Philadelphia College of Art. I had figured out in art school that I was kind of like, I thought, oh, you're not supposed to make like useful things. You have to make things that are about useful things. And so that was kind of like the message that I got there. And so this is my string art. I was also like very influenced by hobby. And then I would say the thing that interests me in fiber so much is really like a kind of combination of process and material and the kind of metaphors that they engender. And this is the, you know, I've never shown this one. I made it in, this is bobbin lace of the Appalachian Trail. I was in a residency in Monson, Maine, which is right next to the Appalachian Trail. And I was thinking about the relationship between, well, bobbin lace is sort of like weaving and walking. And then I'd also say that there's just always like a real problem with like using all the colors. I have to always need to always use all the colors in my work. And fiber is such a great conductor of color.
Yeah. Beautiful. So did you end up walking the trail or parts of the trail?
No, not that one. I did walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain, that 500-mile one. Yeah, but no, when I was in Monson, we were near, it's right at the beginning of the last 100 miles of the Appalachian Trail. And it was November and it snowed all the time. We walked on the trail, but you know, I wasn't gonna be doing any serious hiking then.
So the next question is, where do you find your inspiration? Lauren, do you want to go?
Oh, sure. I can go. I didn't want to be always the one going first, but I can do that.
More now.
Sure. Sure. I will actually share my screen this time. Yeah, I get a lot of my, let's see. Like you said in my introduction, I get a lot of my inspiration from music. Specifically, I listen to like a lot of punk music, and so I really I can't work in my studio without music playing. Like working in silence is just like impossible for me. Or I know a lot of people like podcasts, and I can't have like another person having dialogue while I'm trying to work. And a lot of my pieces are like really inspired by like specific albums, and then like kind of specific songs and parts of albums that like really hit me. And I think it's also part of kind of my interest in that like intersection of humor, comfort, and mental health, and a lot of kind of contemporary punk music coming at things from a very like mental health and expressive point of view. And so like this piece is one that I think I made in 2018 but I think still hits very hard even today, which it says, if you can't tell, I get a little more nervous every day, which is from a Pup song, which is a Toronto-based punk band. And I really love that kind of juxtaposition of the floral fabrics, these kind of like domestic floral fabrics with like the aggressiveness of punk music. And I do a lot of like applying India ink over a lot of my work, but also dyeing it with black dye as well. And I like that kind of, what's the word I'm trying to think of, that difference between staining a fabric versus dyeing it and having that kind of darkness or that stigma being like completely ingrained into the fabric versus just a stain that lays on top of it, and kind of how we think about mental health within art. And so and then also like the kind of organization of botanical prints I'm really interested in, and that like ability to trying to classify and understand the things that are around us. And that's kind of like the history of botanicals, is like you didn't have like a million photographs of plants and everything. You had to draw it like really well at the time, and that's how people like know and understand things. And so it's all this kind of very self-reflective, trying to like understand myself and my brain and how I exist in the world through different pieces. And so this is a series of 3 pillows, all kind of dealing with different ways that I kind of understand the world through, like, here's a flower through organization, myself in kind of hiding, and then text backwards that's kind of obscured and harder to read. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
That's awesome, Lauren. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thanks for being patient. So I live in Alaska, and it's important to me to take the time to acknowledge that I have the privilege of living and working on land that has been stewarded by the Dina Athabascan people for thousands of years, specifically the nearby Eklutna tribe. Their deep care and forethought has actually made it possible for me to raise my children in this place. And so I thank them every day. With that said, I work rhythmically through the seasons up here. We have a lot of daylight in the summer, and that is when, as a family, we've made the choice for probably 7 years now to spend a lot of time in Prince William Sound, where we clean beaches. And so this image of what you see on the left is a piece of a jawbone next to a piece of plastic, marine debris. So we often haul thousands of pounds of net, over the course of multiple seasons, sometimes 10 pounds at a time, sometimes 100 pounds at a time. Ghost net, lots of plastic. Nobody pays us to do this. We just, as a family, have decided that that's how we wanted to raise our children. And so that is part of what's ingrained in the rhythm of our summer, is that idea of collecting and gathering objects, most of which just needs to get hauled to the trash. There's very little that's salvageable, nor is it really very safe to work with. But it's also time to gather my thoughts, which I also think of as material. We are completely unplugged when we're out there. We don't have access to internet. We have a small boat and a satellite phone and a couple kids and lots of garbage bags. And so it's a time to be really quiet and reflective and seeking, I guess, so that when I come to literally a pile of things, which like you see on the right, which is a pile of old doilies, I can look at them in a couple of different ways, one of which is as discarded objects, but also as things that are salvageable. In the wintertime is when I do the more introspective work, but also the production. Recently, I've not been doing that kind of work because I've been in graduate school. So my rhythm is a little off and a little different right now. That's okay. But I want to show you some of the things that I do just in terms of like walking and observing. A summertime image, which is of all of these incredible rocks. Each beach has a completely different set of different types of rocks. And then this other sort of montage of collected photographs from just one of those highly charged emotional walks that I went on one winter day where I noticed like all of these holes in the snow. These two things were sort of lodged in my mind and became this piece. So I'm just showing you this in terms of like where I draw inspiration. It comes from a lot of different places. It comes from the materials themselves. It comes from nature. It comes from place. It comes from memory and body. There's narrative, I feel, inherent in all old cloth. Whether or not you know the actual story behind a piece of cloth, it doesn't really matter. There's still this kind of residue and emotional resonance that comes along with the discarded. This is a full-size image of that piece. So that walk with all of the holes in the snow became this piece, which is called Cherry, which is about moving across that threshold from girlhood into womanhood and that chaotic, emotionally charged environment that you do that in. I'm always trying to come up with ways of exploring margins and borders and scribbles and chaos through stitch, which is actually not that easy, especially for somebody who's been doing handwork for as long as I have, because the hand has the memory of doing it perfectly evenly. And so I have to really pay attention to make a crooked line. And so this work was pretty intense for that reason. So, and that's kind of a long answer for that, but that's how I would answer that question.
Cool. Thank you. Susie?
Wrong direction. Where do you draw inspiration? See, I had to make slides so I can remember. Yeah, it's like, yeah, like Amy's talking about material, Lauren's talking about materials that we're drawn to. Yeah, I think like materials. This is something I made out of pantyhose that was collected by employees at the Summit Bank in Summit, New Jersey. And I wove the pantyhose on pot holder looms. So then there's also process. So, and you know, so it's woven on a pot holder loom, and I copied in Annie Alber's weaving from her book on weaving or on design. I can't remember. It was a black and white picture. I didn't even know what it looked like in real life. But I have since seen it. So I would say materials. So, you know, like as such a kid sewer and everything, like, so I'm in, and I love listening to Amy's accounting of like how, you know, like having things given to you. Like, I love that when things just are given. We get other people's textiles. And I would say that I'm also super inspired by process. Like, just like I was a crazy, like I wanted to learn how to make everything. I wanted to learn how to cook everything kind of kid. And it's not, you know, I can't get over that. So, so I teach in a private art college with fabulous students. And we get goodies sometimes, like a textile printer that prints digitally. And my colleague, Piper Shepard, and I were like, oh my God, cool tool. Now what are we gonna do with it? What can it do that you can't do with anything else? And so we actually work with students on a, you know, like what do we do with this project? And this is something that I made with the new cool tool. So like, give me a tool anytime, I'm right there. So I was going around Baltimore taking pictures of bags and trees and then collaged them together to make this big tree and printed it out. And then, and then the other thing that's like super inspiring to me is like a situation to work in. Like I love, like always, I think I'm always going to be an art student. I've really never graduated. At the Temple Gallery in Philadelphia, this guy, Robert Blackson, runs it. And he had this project going on, this ongoing project where he invited artists to come and do an installation on the couch. So this was the couch. And so now I'm going to name drop. When I was in grad school in Chicago, I worked for Claire Zeisler for a summer. I tied knots with a lot of other people in her studio. And so I don't remember why I felt like I needed to make a Claire Zeisler couch at the time. It was February and I wanted to use sweetheart yarn. So I made this tribute to Claire Zeisler on the couch. So anyway, it's back to that question of like what inspires you. It's like, give me materials, give me tools, or, you know, like give me a little situation, a little problem to solve. And I'm all into that. So thanks.
Yeah, I'm struck by like how you guys are all drawn to like domestic spheres and domestic objects. It's really interesting. Okay, so the next question is what's your favorite part of the artistic process?
Ooh, yeah, my favorite part of the artistic process. I think that would be, I keep like going to the image before sharing my screen and doing this not in the correct order. I think my favorite part of the creative process is really like when you kind of break from the expected. I'm like definitely a huge planner. And so I think of a piece and I start to kind of think of like all the steps to create it to like what I think is going to be the end product. And I think sometimes, and I deviate from that all the time though. So it's like I am a huge planner, but I'm learning to like break from my ability to plan and execute perfectly. And I think that's where like a lot of improvisation and just like trusting the process comes in, and like knowing that like things might change as you keep going, and then that's okay. And like I pulled up this specific piece. I did it at a residency in Vermont a couple of years ago, and they were just like nature studies that I was doing, kind of wandering around the property, drawing and sketching some of the plants and then embroidering them either there outside or later back inside in my studio space. And I didn't really know where this was going. They were just kind of sketches, but then towards like one of the last days of the residency, I was like, just knew, like you just kind of have those moments where it just hits you of like, this is what I must do with this piece. And I will continue thinking about it and maybe analyze it more later, but you just have to follow those gut feelings. And I'm definitely a kind of artist that loves to follow my gut feelings when I have them, because so much of, especially textiles, like if you're gonna, you need to make sure you have like enough fabric or enough thread, or like if you're weaving to make sure you like have the correct dimensions. So there has to be some level of planning and execution and forward thought when working in textiles. But for me, it's like finding that balance between forward thinking and planning ahead and having some sort of plan of action with what you're going to do, but then also being able to kind of break from that or realize then when you don't want to keep following what you think was going to be your plan because something more exciting or more in line with the concept is showing through. And so for me, that's some of the most exciting is when I break from my own plan and kind of make something unexpected, find a new technique, or when you mess up and you're like at first initially annoyed about messing up because it's not how you wanted it to go. And then it ends up being what you want. So like another piece for that would be this one, Fracture, which I made a few years ago. And I was like trying to just apply ink to the entire piece. And then I apparently like I was applying it from the reverse side. So this is the front of the quilt, but I was applying it from the other side because I didn't want it to pool. but like I'd quilted it so tightly that it didn't seep all the way through, and I get these little pockets of where the piecing of the quilting still shows. And at first I was like very annoyed because it didn't do what I wanted it to do. And then as I was sitting with it, I was like, no, actually I love this. But it just took like 2 weeks of being mad at myself for not applying enough ink at first to then finally be like, oh no, this is rad. And now I actually like, I'm still working on trying to figure this out, because it's like, it is so dependent on like how thick the batting is and what the backing material is and what the front and how tightly it's quilted and pieced and all these different elements that come into it. And sometimes I want it to like totally seep through, and other times I want it to have this effect, and I sometimes get it and sometimes don't, and it can be incredibly frustrating, but like learning that that's just part of the process. But it is like, after quilting or embroidering something for countless hours, to then apply ink and have the ink not applied in the way you want it to can be oh so frustrating. But I'm getting so much better at dealing with that kind of chance and accepting it and moving forward from that. And this is like one of those happy accidents that's like now one of my favorite pieces. But yeah, absolutely was just pissed for like 2 weeks after initially making it.
Hey, Lauren, can you show us what's the title of that piece?
Oh, it's called Fracture.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And it's actually, it initially was like a series. It's like actually about, I think it's about 15 little quilts, but I've kind of I've appropriated those little quilts into other pieces now over time, because needing materials and they're already made. And so it's actually, yeah, part of a bunch of, this is like the largest one. So about, 36 by 39, but it ranges, like, I think there's a few pieces like in this kind of sampling of the series, like little quilts that are almost like coaster size, and they're all kind of weird angles. None of them are square or rectangular.
I'm so glad you're talking about this piece, because this is one that's going to be in the show, and I always wanted to know the story about it.
Yeah, it is really rad.
Thank you. I feel like I use so many just descriptive art terms all the time in reading and writing, and so I'm just trying to always vary it and find new ways of just describing art that's not the same like 10 words I read or write all the time. Yeah, once I said rad, I was like, I don't say rad that often in my real world.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, that's weird. It disappeared. Why?
A nice desktop.
Oh, why? Oh, here we go. Okay, so strange. Okay. Yeah, so I think what Lauren said, I am a total planner. And so I have to embrace the not knowing and live in that, which can be really hard and really uncomfortable. But for anybody who works in the arts, whether it's literary arts or visual arts, any sort of art performance, you have to understand that comes along with it is that period of time where you just don't know, and you have to just keep moving through it. So while I don't think that's my favorite part of the process, it's definitely a super important part. And I don't really think I have a favorite part. I mean, I think I go through that. I don't know exactly how the list goes. It's the creative process. It's like, this is going to be rad. This is going to be great. It goes through like, this is tricky. Like, this looks like shit. Like, maybe this will be okay. And now it's great in the end. So, I'm always somewhere in between, like, this is tricky and this looks like shit. I spend a lot of time in that part of the process. But one of the things that I do really love is having the opportunity to tell stories and explore narrative through the work that I do with the materials that I've chosen, to stay kind of bound to, in a way. These are materials that I didn't have a lot of respect for, in part because they were just so ubiquitous growing up. These are suspended pot holders, and they're all crocheted. And, you know, this is a pot holder that never protected any woman's hand ever. They would have been, I've expanded them so that they are stiff and have adhesives on them and have a lot of body now, but they would have been flat and they would have been sort of decorative and they have a lot of holes in them. So I started thinking about, how, you know, how do we protect ourselves in domestic spaces and as women with these really meager implements. So I will show you, so this is a piece called Panoply. This is what it looks like up close. So each of these small dress forms has been stitched with a length of wool tapestry yarn from abandoned embroidery kits, which I have a super soft spot for. Also something that like Sunset and Jiffy Stitch, you know, all these little packets of embroidery kits that I used to love going and picking out with my mom in the 70s. I run across them every once in a while and hoard them because I love the colors of the wool tapestry yarn that comes with them, a lot of which are not even available anymore. So each of these has a length of threaded tapestry yarn that gets knotted, and then I basically just stitched and stitched and stitched until the needle couldn't go any farther, and then I buried the needle and took up another length. So each of these has somewhere between, you know, 25 and 45 needles just stuck in them. They're about the size of a human heart. And what this piece is in response to is a letter that I received while I was engaged in the Inheritance Project from a woman whose mother had been very active in a correspondence with a woman named Amelia, who at some point in the 70s had been incarcerated in the Detroit House of Corrections for killing her abusive husband. And so while Amelia was incarcerated, this woman who told me the story, her mother was very instrumental in hiring a hotshot lawyer, and Amelia was eventually released on grounds of self-defense. But this piece and the very first piece that I showed you were in response to, I'll just go back real quick, to Amelia's experience. This piece is called Fatigue Threshold. And it was very much my exploration and my questioning, that living question inside, like what pushes a woman to that point where she would be willing to kill her husband? Like what did he repeatedly do to her that would cause her to reach her fatigue threshold? And that is, in the study of materials, the amount of force that a lever or a beam or column can take before it collapses. So, you know, these are things that when I'm able to explore a narrative that deeply and connect it to just a living question that I have, like that for me is where something really starts to sing. So that is for sure my favorite part. It's not a comfortable part, but it's still a good place to be.
Thank you for sharing that. I love seeing also your preparatory drawings too. That's so beautiful. So Susie, we had a question for you. What was it like working with Claire Zeisler?
Oh my God. Claire Zeisler. So I was in my 20s and she was probably in her 80s at that time. It was amazing. She had an atelier, you know, and I was just one of them. And she didn't really talk to us that much, but she was a super professional, and I had a great time working with all the other people. And we always got turkey club sandwiches at the corner place. But it was great. And Claire had a great sense of humor. She had stopped smoking by then, which was a good thing. But she was kind of like in her own world too. I was really grateful to work for artists. I've worked for a few different women, and it was really super, it's been super useful. So I'm going to talk about my favorite part of the artistic process really fast. There's no end to my favorite parts of the artistic process. So I didn't even know how to answer this, but I'll show you this picture. I did a show where there's in Philadelphia, there at Jefferson University, I think that's what it's called right now. There's a collection of textiles and stuff. And so I've really love looking at textiles from all over the world, all different kind of places. And I went there and rummaged through it. The show was called Rummage. And I took my own work, and then I took the work in the collection and I put them all together in some show in this house, the house gallery that they had there. And I was trying to make it so you couldn't tell whose was historic or not, or at least so I thought. But working in response to things is super inspiring for me. And working with people, here's something I did at the Anna Leon Owens Gallery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, at the College of Art and Design there. We took all these clothes from the mission that they were going to put in the dump, and we made them into rope. And so I made a rope walk, and got all these people who showed up. It was in the summer, and summer in Halifax is a great thing. And the Canadians are so willing. And so we made rope. And I think that working with people, it's weirdly fun. And that was just like weirdly fun. And then I'm super inspired by, I think I've already talked about this, but like making work in response to things or situations. And this is sort of recent. I made this at the Albany Airport in Albany, New York, which is the capital. It was built on fields that were once belonged to a Shaker community. And I thought I would do something in response to the Shakers. And so I uncovered this spirit drawing that was made by Polly Collins. Then I just ripped it right off and made it in beads and hung it up in this light well. And then I also worked with my cousin, who's the blacksmith, and she's the one who figured out the armature for it. And so like those kind of like figuring out things are really fun for me too. And it's really fun, like listening to Amy and Lauren talk about being planners and all that stuff, because sometimes it's just required, but also like, and Amy talks about that, like, is it going to work? Is it going to work? Is it, like, I don't know. And, like the doubt of making is such a big part of it. I never knew if this was going to work until we raised it up that day. And I worked on it for, almost a year in all the planning phases.
Nice.
So that's mine.
Thank you.
I have a question, Susie, a logistical question with that piece. It looks quite large, and I'm just wondering how it was transported.
Oh, I made it so it could fit in my car. Like
Okay.
I have a Honda Element.
It's
in 4 sections. It's in 4 sections, so it unbolts and comes apart. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then okay.
And I'm at this point in my life where I never make anything I can't lift.
No, absolutely. I'm at a
I feel
point
that way too.
where I have to be able to ship things, and but I'm also like really drawn to working with rocks. I'm like, why do I keep working with rocks? It just makes things so heavy. Like, what am I thinking?
I worked with like found cement chunks for like one semester of grad school, and then I was like, this is fun, but the logistics of doing this post school is awful. Like, I'm not going to be shipping like 30-pound chunks of cement covered in yarn or across the country. I'm not going to store this in my house. I was like, okay, I'm not a sculptor in this way. I don't want to have large chunks of cement and rocks in my studio, as fun as this is.
I feel like that opens up another question. Where do you guys work? Do you have a studio at home, or?
I'm at home. It's a spare bedroom in the basement.
I have also a home studio. It's like a kind of a makeshift garage. My roommate owns the house and was really nice to give a local artist, me, an affordable home and studio space. And so it was kind of like when he was like looking into buying the house, and we know each other through the comedy scene in Portland, because I don't think it was said in my bio, but I'm also a comedian here in the city. I just haven't done any comedy because of quarantine, but I do improv and other weird performance art comedy things and host shows and stuff, which is where like the comfortableness with not knowing, because I go on stage all the time, where I used to, not knowing anything of what I'm about to do. But he got his house and then has kind of let me renovate his garage into my studio space, which has been really lovely to have that be in one home or one amount of rent as well, and not have it be like my bedroom, which it was for the longest time after grad school. It was like my bed and my desk and then just art supplies everywhere, because I was like one person in a 5-person house and I couldn't afford a studio space on top of that.
I don't care where I work. I've almost, for a long time, I think in grad school is the only time I didn't work at home for the longest time. I mean, like I love to get up in the morning and just work all day. And then realize, oh my God, I forgot to take my, I have good pajamas so that, you know, they look good all day. But I right now am in upstate New York, and always have worked, I've always just like set up domestic situations where it was all studio kind of. And then now it's like, then I had, for a long time, I had, like for about 7 years, I had this giant studio in Baltimore outside my house that was really luxurious. But then I was like, oh, that costs too much money. And now I've like took that money and then I bought this other house in upstate New York. So that's where I am right now. And it's like everything's, you know, it's like everything's a studio. But yeah. And yeah, and then I have, then in Baltimore, with the Baltimore house, there's also studio space. I don't know. And I also, now I'm like really loving the residency thing. It's so fun. You can go out and it's like, oh, I don't even have a studio. It's like, I'm just making it up right here on the fly. So yeah, there's, yeah, it's funny. I think that it's fun to get, you know, sort of to make a studio wherever.
So I think we should skip to the last question. What ideas and/or projects are you working on now, and how has quarantine affected your practice?
Oh, yeah. It took a lot. I know a lot when quarantine first started, a lot of people, I don't really have slides or any images prepared for this one because my studio is a little bit of a mess. And yeah, with like so many, I had travel plans and residencies and exhibitions and all these things planned for 2020, which obviously did not happen. And it was a bit of a shock for me to just kind of have all these things that I was looking forward to canceled, and a lot of like unknowns, but not in a fun way to have in the future. Just a lot of very scary unknowns. And so I kind of froze for the first few months of quarantine. Like I know a lot of people were like, this is my time to be in the studio and work and get things done. And I just did not have the brain to do any of that. And I just kind of cleaned and just looked at things a lot and just was, I mean, still working and everything, but it kind of took me until maybe just July at the earliest of starting to get back into the studio and doing it really slowly and I've been sewing clothes a lot, and kind of that way I feel like I'm doing something, but it's a little hard with my work being so referential of how I'm feeling and my kind of emotional state in the world, and my emotional state at the time not being a place where I like want to even really express how I'm feeling. I'm like, this sucks and I don't know what to do, and I don't want to make art right now about how I'm feeling because this doesn't feel good. And so that was kind of my way of at least doing something with my hands, because I did miss it. I just didn't want to quilt and I didn't want to embroider. And so I was making clothes. I made some like jackets and some pants and dresses, and I like buying very simple patterns and like messing with them, altering them, making them more complicated versus finding really complicated patterns and like creating them perfectly. And I've just started to kind of get back into quilting and embroidery again, probably within the past month. I also had to get my machine repaired, and then it took like 8 weeks to get my machine repaired because everyone's getting their sewing machines repaired right now because of quarantine. But I have 2 machines. I just don't like my other one that much. And so I finally have kind of gotten back into quilting, and I'm doing more kind of improvised piecing, like the work behind me, which I did at the same residency in Vermont. And this is a collaborative piece with the musician that was there. I'll just like, oh wait, I have images of this on my website. And I still need to share my screen.
I feel like you've updated your website since I last looked for the Remnants show, because there's some new work.
Yeah, there's some new pieces that I made. I had 2 residencies in New Zealand last year. Actually, I was in New Zealand a year ago today, and I tried not to think about that because it was so fun, and now I'm trapped inside when I was exploring New Zealand for 6 weeks. But yeah, I finally got around to like actually photographing and putting all that on my website. But this piece I did, and so I'm doing a lot more kind of improvised quilting, which I really like because, like the name suggests, I don't go in with a plan, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and so I don't know like the scale or exactly how it's going to look, and that kind of feels nice to not be like, this is the plan and I'm going to execute it, but just like, all right, today I'll just sew a few more pieces of fabric together, and once my brain doesn't want to do it anymore, then I'll stop doing it. And that's kind of how I've been handling quarantine. It's kind of just really trying to take it day by day and not expect too much out of myself, and not trying to push myself to be massively productive during this time, because it is a really like uncertain and scary and difficult time for a lot of people. And yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and share. Let me skip towards the end here. So I mentioned before that I'm in grad school. So I'm in the 3rd semester of critical craft studies through Warren Wilson College, which is already a low residency program, the majority of which is online. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to meet in the actual 2-week intensive residency. We weren't able to meet this fall, nor will we be able to meet in January, which is a super bummer. But like everything else, particularly motherhood, for me, there is no pause, right? I've talked to other women about this with regards to grieving in particular, how much of that kind of emotional resonance gets buried in the work, particularly in handwork. So in response to COVID, the Anchorage Museum reached out to me to do a commissioned piece for a show that they had actually started putting together in December called Future Ready, Survival Now and Next. So I made a series of suits, and the piece as a whole is called Mother Thought of Everything. And it's in collaboration with my children. I have 2 children. The baby is not actually a baby in a pandemic Tyvek suit, so it's a doll baby. But we went out into the land and took a lot of photographs in this place where we felt really safe. And this really looks at, how do you protect your children during this time? How do you have a response to everything that's happening with regards to the politics around wearing masks? What is domesticity? What is the safety of home? What is the safety of the landscape? So there was a big project that I did for them, the museum, which has been so great. I worked with a photographer named Brian Adams, who I've worked with for years, and we just really get each other in terms of work. So it was a very easy, like that part of it was really easy, and I was super happy with the results of the photography part of it. They're so much better when they're inhabited, these suits. The other thing that I've been really, I guess, surrounding myself with is this idea of motherhood and embracing it. I think I spent a lot of time early on in the mothering phase of my life where I really felt like I had lost my art form, that, you know, it was just the demands of now caregiving for these two small people really took me away from who I was as a creative person. And what I realize now, and have realized for the last handful of years, is that this is the next phase of who I am as a creative person. And what scares me more is like them not being here, right? Them not being in the same space to sort of bounce off of, especially collaboratively, which has been really exciting now that they're 12 and 14 and super capable people. So this piece is one that I finished up, I guess last year, in response to some of the thoughts that I was having around motherhood. And it is now currently in a show that just opened at the beginning of the month. It's a group show that I've been working on for 2 years with 4 other Alaskan artists, and I was super privileged to be in their company for this show called Fragile Domestic, which is at the Bunnell Art Center in Homer, Alaska. So in the corner is this incredible work by Sonia Kelleher-Combs, which is all of those little circles. She's calling them drawings, but they're, I think there's 102 of them that she made in response to COVID. That's actually her hair that she has stitched onto wax infused paper during the time of the pandemic. So every time she took a shower and her hair came out, she stitched onto these fragments. So I learned a lot from these other women, and it was super great to be able to install and show and actually have a show in a physical gallery, knowing that they were taking, you know, tons of safety precautions, but that people could actually still enter a space and see the work. And then this last piece that I'll show you is also about motherhood. This piece is called Birth Weight, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. So these stones that have been encapsulated in wool stitch and vintage linens and suture thread, all together weigh about the size of kind of an average newborn weight. But of course you can't physically hold them all in your hands without some part of it dropping. So that again is more inquiry into motherhood, which is, I really feel, for female artists who are mothers, it's really hard to have the privilege of going to a residency or feeling supported in those ways when you have children to care for. I know there are now more residencies that are family friendly, but really it's tough. It's super tough until your kids are a certain age. And even then it's a different kind of tough.
Thank you. Those suits are amazing.
Thank you. They're hanging here. Like these beings.
Susie, what have you been up to?
You're going to be sorry you asked. I'm not going to talk about that or that. I'm going to talk about this. Oh my God, I've been dying to talk about this. I teach in a private art college, and we had to switch to online learning in last March. And then all of a sudden I was going to teach all these kids how to use a sewing machine. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't. So I figured out how to teach hand stitching, you know, using my phone and Zoom and everything. And we had art, so I teach at MICA, and we have this group of people who make quilts to raffle. And we've been doing it for student scholarships, and we've been doing it for a number of years. And so we get together once a week and work on these quilts, and it's been great. And we had to stop that, and I missed it. So I got in touch with one of the students who was helping me with that, and the two of us were working on it together. And I said, hey, do you want to try this on Zoom? Like, let's do it over the summer. Want to try it? And he said yes. So we started doing, and then we got in touch with our other regular contributors, who are these women from the African American Quilters of Baltimore. This is an incredible group we've been working with for a few years. And they were like game. They're like, yeah, we'll do the Zoom thing. And so we designed some quilts, and I figured out how to make tutorials, and I made a little website. And then all these people joined. You know, and so we made a couple of quilts this summer. We made a crazy quilt, and we made a log cabin quilt. And we also decided, because it was like crazy summer, like we started in June when everything was just really nuts. And we said, what are we gonna raffle them? What cause are we gonna raffle them for? And I got great feedback from this group, and they said, let's do it for the, it was recommended we do one for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and the other one for a food security organization called Black Yield Institute in Baltimore. And so those first two quilts, I sent out all the materials in the post office and with a self-addressed stamped envelope, and then people sent them back. So we made these quilts, and we've just finished the first raffle of the first log cabin quilt, and we got over $3,000 for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And you're probably wondering where you can get your raffle tickets for the next one.
Absolutely.
The next one. So what you should do is just Google, this is the one that's up for raffle right now, this crazy quilt. And I want you to know, people stitch their blocks by hand. And then they also added like embroidery and stuff like that. This one, if you just Google the MICA store, you'll find it, or Google MICA raffle quilt, you'll find the site. So this one's the one that's up for now. You can get a ticket for only $5, or you can get groups of tickets. And there's going to be a drawing on October 30th. We're also, and so we have a once a week Zoom meeting. It's been just unbelievable. I thought we were only going to do it for the summer, but it goes on and on. So right now the squares are coming in, and I have to show these off because they're the ones behind me, and then they're these. But they're, we're working on a quilt now, and these are for MICA scholarship. But these are, this is called the Viewfinder 2020 quilt, like what came into focus for you in 2020. And so here's like unbelievable pieces that people have been working on that we'll put together. These will make 2 different quilts. But I couldn't be more pleased. And some of these people are Wisconsiners who are on this slide. And so the other thing that's so amazing about Zoom, it's like, how can we all be together in Alaska and Portland and Adirondack land? But we have Zoom. And this is one that I'm going to leave with, that because this one's made as a tribute to Zoom. So yeah, so buy your raffle tickets. So I've been doing that. I also, like, follow me on Instagram. I also have this nervous habit of making all this other stuff too. Yeah, it's been like kind of like, I think, you know, it's been, I go nowhere. I only see my mother. So that's like, my life is like making stuff and making working on this quilt project.
Thank you. So MICA raffle quilt, and the drawing is on October 30th. So So we're going to open it up to questions from panelists, attendees. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments in the chat. Otherwise, I'm gonna say thank you to these wonderful artists. They are so amazing. I feel like I'm your ultimate groupie, honestly. I've been following your work for such a long time, and I say this every time, but I feel like every time we go on Zoom, I get to travel, even though I'm in Milwaukee. And so it's really a wonderful way to connect. So yeah, and now you're gonna get lots of nice comments. Thank you.
See a question. Now it's gone. I don't know where to go. Oh, from Janet Falk.
Oh, yeah.
Asking which grad program, and it's an MA in Critical Craft Studies through Warren Wilson College in North Carolina.
Yeah, so everyone's saying, oh, such beautiful work. Thank you, so inspiring, thank you. Thank you, you're all inspiring. I love the use of recycled fibers. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Janet Falk also asked, are any of these women Indigenous? I'm assuming that Janet is referring to the show at the Bunnell, and yes, Sonia Kelleher-Combs is Indigenous. She lives here in Alaska.
Yeah. So I will save this chat for these lovely ladies so that they get to read all the nice comments.
Well, this was a treat, Emily. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for doing all the hard work to make Remnants actually still happen. I know that was a big shuffle, and there's a lot of behind the scenes, so I want to say thank you to Melissa and Devin as well, who are quietly like on the ones and twos making this happen today.
Yeah, thank you, Devin and Melissa. You're awesome. Yes, as some people might know, Remnants was postponed. We were supposed to open in April of this year, but because of everything, we have decided we had to postpone. So I'm really grateful that you all three are still committed, and it's gonna happen. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.